Retirement lets you redefine yourself, and it's an opportunity you have to go off in a new direction, and an opportunity you probably haven't had since you were a kid.
I'm meeting a lot of people. I'm getting into the outdoors, which I like to do.
These are waterproof.
And maybe my little way I can help the environment.
Big things can come from little groups when your goals are right.
Celsius.
And in no time at all, I got a call. And the interviewer said, "We do have a volunteer place in Germantown." She said, "It's a senior environment corps, and maybe you'd be interested." And I said, "Well, what do they do?" And she said, "They monitor the water in the streams."
This is the Monoshoni tributary.
I backed into it, and I found out it was wonderful.
Sometimes the gun is even dragging the floor. They can't even carry the gun.
To teach a child to kill, you first have to kill everything a child knows. Village, school, family, friends, even self.
I cry every day. Every day, I cry. Even now, I cry. Sometimes I think about it, and I start crying again. And I'm still crying.
It was the last of a series of battles. The whole series would have lasted probably some 30 years.
The church in Bryn Athyn is the first church in the last 400 years to employ curves in plan and bends in elevation. This departure from mathematical and geometrical symmetry is really faithful to tradition. Thus, the cathedral was not built on straight lines and perfect right angles. Rather, most walls are slightly curved. Arches do not rise to equal heights. The walls of the main tower taper slightly inward. Interestingly, these refinements actually soften the lines of the building and make it more pleasing to the eye.
I don't like being in here at night by myself. If there are ghosts anywhere, they would be here. In the early years, prisoners at Eastern State lived in extreme isolation. They woke up in their cells, spent 23 hours a day in their cell, went to bed in their cell, and knew almost nothing aside from this small white room. Typical sentence was about 2 years. Inmates were given some kind of simple work to do in their cells and given nothing to read except for the Bible. The majority of them were illiterate anyway. And so, in the early decades of the prison's use, the experience of an inmate would be about surviving isolation. Day in, day out for years at a time with almost no human contact. Spending years in strict isolation can drive a person insane.
Have no fear, there's no need to be scared. I was checked last year and everything is all clear.
You can never tell by looking. It just doesn't work. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't.
Nobody else in my mind, you're God's perfect design. I want our flesh to combine because you're one of a kind.
1 out of every 4 sexually active people under the age of 25 has had or has a sexually transmitted disease.
Don't you trust me?
1 in 5 Americans over the age of 12 is actually infected with herpes.
Don't you trust me?
9 million people in the U.S. are infected with HIV most of them do not know that they're affected.
Don't you trust me? You must be bugging to say that I'm loving and leaving them by the dozen. A minute ago I wasn't. Don't you trust me?
Kathy Schrader was diagnosed in April 1997 with CML, chronic myelogenous leukemia. She took her whole family to a first meeting with Dr. Mangan.
I was not his patient yet. He was not getting any money for this. And he spent almost 3 hours with the whole gang of us. And I remember my one brother and I asking questions about, well, what if this happens during the transplant? You know, crisis number one. The one phrase that I think about with him is that he was realistic but reassuring.
After the long and difficult preparation, the transplant itself was kind of a relief, called a birthday, the first day of what is hoped to be a healthy new life. In a note of gratitude to Dr. Mangan, Kathy included a resonant quote from a book by Dr. Rachel Raymond.
It speaks to the delicate balance that he maintains. And the quote is, "Medicine is as close to love as it is to science. And its relationships matter even at the edge of life itself."